Matt?
About minutes later, if I don't take notes fast enough.
Amy was better, she could take.
Amy was better at everything. So. I will fail at that comparison at every turn.
All set, ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll call the November 13th Berkeley Zoning Board of Appeals meetings to order. And at this time, I'd like to ask everybody to stand, face the flag, and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Baumgart, could you call the roll?
My pleasure. Allen?
Here.
Smith?
Here?
Busan?
Here.
Kirby? Here. McAlpine? Here. Evans?
Here.
Butts? Not Evans? Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, we have a proposed agenda before us tonight. Do any members of the board or staff have any proposed changes?
Move to approve.
Support.
Motion to approve and support. Any discussion? Mr. Baumgart.
Yes, sir. All right. Allen?
Here. Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Busan?
Here.
Kirby?
Yes.
McAlpine?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. The next item of business is the approval. Our last meeting was June 13th. We've been provided meeting minutes. Do any members have any questions or proposed modifications? I do have what I believe to be possibly two on the last page.
Yep.
The first one would be under other business. And it appears that the way it's written, that there may be some word or a word or two not there. Mr. DeSund offered a comment during the proposed exterior appliance ordinance. Was that a discussion that was occurring? It just seems like
It was just an offhand comment after that didn't really belong in the discussion, but
and it just says, yeah, and all it says is Mr. DeSund offered a comment during the proposed exterior appliance ordinance.
Oh, perhaps
It should-
during should be on
Or during other
or
business.
about.
During
Yeah,
other
just-
business, I think works.
Just for flow.
regarding.
Regarding, okay. All right, and that's one thing, and then the other one being, is that it indicates that I adjourned the meeting at 8:49, and I was not here.
You're good.
So just some minor changes that I found. All right.
Yep, so, with those, unless there are any other changes with those two corrections, I would make a motion to approve the minutes from our June 13th, 2017 meeting.
Support.
We have a motion and support, any discussion? Mr. Baumgart.
All right. Smith?
Yes.
Busan?
Yes.
Kirby?
Yes.
McAlpine?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
And Evans?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, we're gonna move on now to the items for appeal. Our first case is for Pamela and Brett Henry at 1693 Edgewood. Mr. Baumgart, could you introduce the case?
Sure. Pleasure, Mr. Chair. Pamela and Brett Henry of 1693 Edgewood, south side of Edgewood, between Mortensen and Brookline, is requesting a variance to exceed the maximum driveway width in order to install a 10-foot driveway in addition to an existing driveway. You have the application in your packet. You'll note Mr. Henry has an existing driveway that provides vehicle access to an existing attached garage. The ordinance allows for him to build a second garage as an accessory structure in the rear of his property, and needs to access the rear of that property with his vehicle. And the existing driveway is 17.5 feet. It slightly exceeds our ordinances, but it is existing and is not really the topic of the discussion here. What Mr. Henry is proposing then is a 10-foot wide single vehicle lane to go to the outside. The area in question here is the area between the front corner of the house and the front sidewalk. So any of the sidewalk or any of the drive lane past that point is not the purview of the ordinance. That's the item in question.
Thank you. Do any members of the board have any questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask the applicant to approach the podium. If you just tell us who you are and tell us why you like this variance.
Hi, Brett Henry, my wife Pam.
Hello.
And we would like to build a garage. And your current codes don't allow us to preventing us from putting this stretch of driveway in. But if I don't put that piece of driveway in, anything in front, be from the front of the attached garage back is fine. But anything in front of that is all grass and can't be driven on. So if I can't get that section of driveway put in, then that would force me to either not build the garage or drive across my lawn constantly.
We have a existing
Because-
sprinkler system at that.
Well,
This is a big issue there too.
We do have a sprinkler system, but the whole point of the garage is because I'm a contractor, so I have a work truck that I would like to put in the garage behind my house instead of parking it in the driveway in front of my house consistently. And we did have an instance where somebody was trying to break into it is a strong word, but they toyed around with it and the alarm was set off, so it stopped them from getting into it. But I kind of want my truck in the backyard with my valuable tools and equipment in it.
Our current garage doesn't have doors that are tall enough for us to do that, so
Right.
we need to, the additional garage would allow us to build taller doors to accommodate the van.
All set? Okay.
Do you have any questions for us?
And I was going to offer that to the board. Do any members of the board have any questions for the applicants?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Smith?
you included pictures of several other wide driveways.
I did, yes.
The middle one, which is one of my favorites in Berkeley, it's just very tastefully done.
Yes.
I love it.
A common element among these three is that the driveway going to the accessory structure is about 10 feet wide. And the way they fan out from the existing drives
Mhm.
is different than what you proposed. And I'm looking at yours and trying to think, okay, you need width for a turning radius, but do you really need all that width? One of our responsibilities here is to only give you the minimum that can be done to satisfy a variance request, and I need to get my brain around your design.
Right.
Okay.
And I did send a picture to Matt. I don't know if he has that.
We've got drawings that you submitted.
It's, actually, I think did I put in here? The reason that it extends out so far is because we have brick pavers currently
I saw those.
existing, and I would rather not disturb those. I still want a patch of grass between my garage and the driveway, and I have a walk-through gate at the back corner of my
Yes,
house
I did see that from the
Yeah.
street, yes.
that I want to keep. So that's the whole purpose of going around that rather than removing all that stuff and having what I would consider a basketball court in my front yard. You know, I want to keep it kind of
Narrow.
attractive and
Right.
narrow, yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Any other members with any questions for the applicants? I do have do you know how many square feet the existing garage is? Or its dimensions?
The garage itself,
Yeah, the existing.
20, I don't know the exact dimensions of the garage. This shows 20.8 by 30.3, but we do have on the back of our house like a sun porch that is part of that 30.3.
Right.
That is
okay.
not in, that's not part of the garage.
Just for estimation purposes, it says here, I see about 20, almost 21 feet wide. About that deep? Two-car garage, 2.5
Yeah, I would
car
guess,
garage, I'm just
the
trying to
sun
get a-
porch is probably, yeah, 8 to 10 feet deep.
Okay.
Yes,
So 20 by 20, maybe a little bigger is probably accurate.
probably, yes, I would guess so.
And then my other question would be is, on the proposed garage, about how many square foot is that?
That should be included on the set of prints that we gave you. 800 and,
Outside of our discussion, the size of the proposed garage?
Well, it may be,
Yeah, maybe.
but I'd like to know, so you said around 800?
it's a little over 800, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
I had an architect draw up plans and we did the math, the equations to figure out the square footage of the house versus the,
Make it fit in with the.
what we could cover on the property and maxed it out because I only want to do it once, I don't want to do it twice, you know? Yep. Mhm. There's a shed there that may not have anything, that's gonna be gone, that's gonna, the garage will replace that.
All right. Okay, that's my question.
Chairman, I have a couple questions for the administration. Sure. Thank you. The square footage on the garage, that's under the current allowance that he's doing, the 800 and some odd square foot, so he's fine on that, the size?
The proposed garage?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. And then, he could really have a driveway coming all the way to the front of his house, right? Without,
There would be an option, yes, to treat
without
it.
any variance, that also was allowed up to the front of the house?
Yeah, to the front wall.
It's just nothing in front of the house, that's where it can't be that wide,
Right,
correct?
right. So you have a triangle of,
Right.
landscape area that would need to be spanned to get to
And
one
this is
to
a
the other.
100-foot lot, so he could also have a second approach, correct?
Yeah, that would be an option as well as, the ordinance allows for, on the detached garage, to just have an independent curb cuts. But, again, it's sort of moving away from the minimum.
Right, but he could do that
He-
without variance.
No, he would need a variance for that as well,
For
for
the
the
second
second driveway,
approach.
the second curb cut, second approach.
Now, may I ask a question on that?
You get through, Mr. Clerk?
I am, okay,
Sure.
thank you.
The second approach would, the way I understand it is that would have to be used for like a turnaround driveway across the front of the house, correct?
Mr. Baumgartner?
If you're thinking more like a circular, I think,
Circular
if I'm
driveway.
understanding Mr. Kirby correctly, would be a standalone driveway that goes from all the way to curb to all the way to the front driveway.
So straight down to the street
Yeah,
from that side?
Yeah, my question was just that this lot could have the two approaches in the circle. You would still need a variance for the approach going straight down. And that was kind of the point.
Okay, yes,
Yep.
yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Hearing no more questions from the board members, I'll ask you to take a seat and I'll open up the public hearing. Okay, is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in regards to this matter? Please approach the podium. Sir, come on right up. If you could just let us know your name and give us an idea of your proximity to the house, that'd be
Yes.
helpful.
My name is Alex Nicolaescu, spelled Nicolascu, and I live at 1692 Edgewood, which makes it right across the street from the proposed project. Theoretically, I would be the one mostly impacted by this project, but I looked at the proposal, I talked to Mr. Henry, and I don't have any objection to it. I think it would be a good idea for the board to consider this appeal because, number one, like he said, he's a very successful electrical contractor and he's got equipment and would be a lot aesthetically pleasing to have that truck inside of a garage instead of out in the driveway or in the street most of the time. So I'm in fully support of this proposal. I know there are some tweaking to be done, but I think the way it looks right now, I don't have any objection to it. I'm fully supportive of it.
Very good. Oh, thank you for your comment.
You want it?
Does any other member of the public have any comment for the board? Mr. Baumgartner, have we received any written comment?
We have not.
No, sir. Okay, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for discussion and potential motion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Smith.
when I look at this particular application, there's no issue with neighbor setbacks or encroaching on other properties. The only concern I've got is that of the turning radius. And is that more than the minimum? My work truck is an extended cab Ford F-250, and I would need a turning radius like that to make a building useful if I was coming off my drive. So I look at it, and it looks like it's bigger than the minimum required. It's certainly bigger than the other side drives, but that house is also tighter to the street. So there's different issues there that, make me support the variance as applied.
Any other discussion from our board members? Mr. Kirby? Yeah.
I agree with that. I do think the concrete needs to be a little wider to make that cut. It doesn't look like there's a lot of space between the existing garage and the sidewalk.
No, it's tight.
Yeah, and I also like the fact we're keeping some green space there between the structure and the driveway too, because that does still keep us in front yard look instead of just a straight parking lot look. So I think I can support this as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other board members?
I have no comments.
I do have one question or reservation. In the past, it's always been my understanding that this had to be, in order to approve something, that it had to be for some sort of defect in the property or something that wasn't the applicant's, due to the actions of the applicant, and that anything that we pass is going to go with the property, whether the applicant is here or not. And doing this for the convenience of the applicant's truck seems like it doesn't satisfy that.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Mr. Smith?
My thinking on that is the city regulations now allow the applicant to put an outbuilding behind his house.
Okay.
He can run concrete the entire width of his yard up to the front of his house.
Okay.
That's all fine. And there's nothing that we would be involved in as a zoning board of appeals. The only issue that we have here is how does he connect to anything that's at the front of his house or behind it. So we could tell him, no, you need to drive on the grass, which until it rains is fine.
Yeah.
And so what's a reasonable way to work around the ordinance? Some of the communities I've done work in require you to actually put a door in the back of your garage,
Okay.
which is ridiculous.
Right.
So I look at this as being something that actually allows the city to accommodate an ordinance that we've written.
Okay.
Mr. Allen?
You have one reservation, and it comes from 2 years ago in August and this year in August. Every time I see more open percolating ground covered up by concrete, it makes me cringe just a little bit, because it has become problematic with non-permeable surfaces, and that's my only reservation that I have when I see a space this size.
The report that Mr. Baumgarten provided said that the city examined this issue in 2008 and created individual standards for detached buildings and attached buildings. And I'm having a challenge seeing why that was not intentional. And what I see here is the proposed building as well as the existing garage. I'm not convinced those are highly atypical or unique. It's very possible that the ordinance intended to have either A, what's out there now, or B, in the instance where someone has a detached building, something similar that goes all the way back and allowing people to fan out as they move beyond the front lot line. Those are my thoughts. Sir?
See, I believe, you're correct, we did look at it in 2008, and yet we still have this particular issue on this lot. And really, the issue is just what's happening in front of the house, is where everything seems to be accounted for. The building, like you're saying, even back to the permeable surface, which is a concern. He could actually put concrete the whole distance, the whole width, and that is just perfectly legal with nothing we can say, right up until the front edge of his building. And then it's just grass from here on out, and they would just issue the permit for that, and that would be perfectly fine. I think what we're looking for is a solution for the applicant, for the neighborhood. Yes, so everybody's benefiting from this is really what we're charged with here this evening. We're not going to rewrite it. They looked at it in 2008.
Right.
Came up with that. This circumstance wasn't able to fall into that work that they did in 2008. They weren't able to address what's happening today. Therefore, it put back on our plate.
Yeah, before anyone proposes, I do have one more question either for the applicant or staff. Could you just come on back up, Mrs. Applicant? You mentioned a truck and won't fit in the garage. Can you describe to us, are we talking a 13-foot box truck or?
No, it's an E350 extended van with ladders on the top.
Okay.
So the garage that we're proposing has a 9-foot door. The existing garage that's attached to our house will not allow for a door that tall.
Sure.
You had mentioned like a door on the back. That was a thought of ours too, but we have the sun porch that we can't get through
So the
the existing garage.
E350, for my edification, is just looks like a typical cargo van, similar perhaps to the one I saw that was out there on Sunday, just maybe a little longer, or?
Yeah, it's just it's not a box van, it's a cargo van, it's a
Okay.
standard height
And
with
what I'm trying
ladders
to
on
do
it.
is to assess the necessity of the width of the turning radius, which is the subject of our discussion. So thank you for answering my question.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'll bring it back to the board for any further discussion or motion. Mr. Kirby?
Yeah, I also had some thoughts about that existing garage and the door through. A van like that, more than likely has a 7-foot door on there now. And, if you look at the ridge lines of the house itself and runs around it, there's obviously a couple colonials and then the ranches. You really have to raise that right side of the house in order to bring that garage door up. It would drastically change the look of that particular house. You would have to raise some of the ridge lines to try to even it off to make it look
It might be a
aesthetically
lot of work.
even. Yeah, if you will.
Yeah, well, based on the answer I received from the applicant, I'm convinced he's done everything, they've done everything they can to try to minimize the impact of what's gonna be in the front yard, and he's actually kept it narrow as possible until almost midway through the existing structure. Hearing no more discussion, is anyone prepared to make a motion?
I'll make the motion. I'd like to make a motion that we approve, it's already in the motion, that we approve the request for BA 0717 to let the petitioner install a variance to exceed the maximum driveway width in order to install a 10-foot driveway in addition to their existing driveway. Based upon the findings that we have and the comments from the petitioner, I believe they do meet the practical difficulty. And given the, everything else is permitted, we need to approve this so that they can make their driveway accessible.
Sure. Okay, we have a second.
I'll support that.
Mr. Kerr, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this? Hearing none, Mr. Bumper.
Okay, Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Casson,
Yes.
Kirby,
Yes.
McAlpine,
Yes.
Allen,
No.
and Evans.
Yes.
Okay, motion as a majority, passes.
We move on to our second item for appeal. This is an application for Tim Chapman at 3012 Oakshire. Mr. Bumper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Information out here. Mr. Tim Chapman of 3012 Oakshire. Legal description and parcel ID included in your packet. Oakshire, on the east side of Oakshire between Beverly and Wiltshire, requesting a variance to allow a pool to remain within 6 feet of an existing fence. The variance would be to zoning code, Article 3, Division 1, accessory buildings and structures, Section 138-59, swimming pools, subsection A, wall of the swimming pool shall not be located less than 6 feet from any rear or side property line. We outlined the application materials are in your packet, outlined the conditions that bring this to a variance here, and I believe the applicant is with you this evening, so.
Any members of the board have any questions for staff?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Smith.
One question, Matt. I haven't done a pool in almost 20 years, but at some point I recall there was also a distance from buildings. Is that part of our ordinance or is that in another community?
I believe that is part of the ordinance. Yes, Mr. Smith. I brought my handy dandy ordinance laptop for you.
So I just, for background, I was able to talk to the applicant this afternoon while I was making my rounds. And the way the pool is set up, it's, you know, for a useful sized pool, it's about as well placed as you can put it. But it's very close to his garage. And I know when my kids were young, I was terrified at the thought that they would climb up on the garage and jump into the pool. And I remember, it was either here or Livonia. Somebody you had to be 6 feet from any building. I can't recall. I looked through tonight and I didn't see anything.
It does sound reminiscent, but I'm trying to recall if that was in one of my previous communities as well. I know I've done it, jump from a garage into a pool.
Oh my God,
I'm
it is.
thinking 10 feet is, we had one of these a few years back
Yeah.
over on,
I can't recall.
So 6 feet from the side property line, a wall from swimming pool. There is a capacity test here that's, it looks like it mandates whether above or below a 600 or fewer gallons makes a difference in how close it can be to an existing building. If it's capacity 600 fewer gallons may be exempted from any side yard setbacks. I don't believe that's the case given the size. Okay, a minimum 10 feet. Overhead wires, pool heaters, things like that. There's a distance requirement for there. But I'm not seeing anything that puts it in relation to a structure.
Okay, good.
And items A, B, and C listed here in section 138-59. So,
Mr. Allen, did the city have
happen to be provided with a copy of the installation contract for the pool?
I did not see that included in the packet.
Because that sure would be helpful to see if obtaining a permit was on that contract.
Perhaps the applicant, Mr. Chairman, do you recall if one was provided?
There was not one provided, no.
Okay.
I know I didn't see one, so.
Any other questions from any members of the board? Hearing none, Mr. Chadwick, if you could approach.
Sure.
Let us know what you need to hear.
Okay. First of all, good evening, members of the board. To kind of make a long story short for you guys, I'm a fairly new homeowner in the city of Berkeley. This will be our 3rd year. And in my 2 previous residences, I've never even come close to having needed getting city approval for anything. Bottom line, I didn't have anything put in. So I was a bit naive into some of the ordinances that needed to be checked. In saying that, purchasing the pool from the vendor that we purchased it from here in the city of Berkeley, giving them the size of the lot that we had to work with in terms of the grass. There was no mention made of, you know, what the ordinances were in terms of how far away it had to be. So given that, you know, normally a man who does his due diligence, I was led to believe that the size in question was not going to be an issue. The only issue brought up was the overhead wire that existed, which we did take care of. And so upon getting inspection for the electrical, that's when the issue first arose. The installer that we were recommended to by the vendor that we purchased the pool from was their #1 recommended vendor, installer. And because he lives out in Howell, it wasn't much convenience to get with him. There was no contract provided. It was basically, you were recommended by this pool store. You were their #1 guy, and he said, okay, I've been doing it for this long, which I later found out to believe that it was his father's company. Again, long story short, when the pool was installed, I found out after the fact that there was no permit pulled. There was no question of, hey, I've been doing this for this long, this is going to be too close to your side property fence, or this is going to be too close to your garage. So really it was a summer of trying to catch up, and I know it sounds like this is a selfish request, but I can assure you that the purpose of the pool, you know, aside from personal convenience, it was also my daughters are big into swim, and as much as we take them to swim lessons, there's really no substitute for practical use, and so that really was the purpose of having this. And I can assure you that had we had any inclination of it was even close to being too close, we would have checked into it. And so that's why we went through the proper route of contacting the city, asking the questions that should have been asked beforehand, that should have been maybe given to us by the vendor, by the seller, and then coming to this zoning board of appeals. So I can answer any other questions you might have for me, but that's the reason why we're here today.
Thank you. Do any members of the board have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Kirby.
Thank you. Did you receive a letter or something from the city?
Yes, I received a letter basically saying that our, you know, the fact that we had a pool in the backyard and there was no record of a permit, which I had let him know. I believe it was Cecil, and I can't remember his last name. He came out to do the electrical inspection, and with his assistant kind of looked at it and said, first of all, you need a permit. And I told him, I realized this after the fact. And he said, this goes against code, but he was the one who actually suggested to take it to the zoning board and see, you know, what route we could go with that, because of the fact that the pool had already been installed. Kind of going back to what I had said earlier, there was no contract from the vendor, so there, you know, had we gone with that, I could see, you know, branching off into different areas, but it was kind of a verbal contract. The work was done. and, you know, kind of still going back and forth with him on the side with some other things, but, you know, this is the most important issue, so.
Sure. Was it pools out here that you got the?
Pools and spas at go-go, yes, sir.
And then, did that same contractor do the electrical too?
No. No, the electrical was done by a electrician from A1 Electrical. His name is Marcus Dixon. And then his electrical work was approved by the city inspector.
So, okay, let me, so he pulled a permit.
Yes.
The electrical inspector came out to inspect it, and that's when you found out that
Yeah.
it was Cecil that let you know it was too close to the lot line and you should contact the city?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
And the electrical inspection came after that. So he kind of came out and said, okay, because the issue at that point was taking down the overhead wire, and that's kind of what got the snowball rolling. So Cecil suggested, he said, you'll want to contact the city, make sure that you look up the ordinance. They're going to come out and let you know where it's too close, how far it needs to be, what possible remedies might need to occur. And then I had the electrical done to prep for the conversion box, and then DTE came out. And so, you know, unfortunately this was a June to just completed in mid-September project for something that was supposed to be, you know, a summer convenience. And if I could speak on one other thing, and I don't know if it's speaking out of turn, but to address Mr. Smith's issue about the garage, you know, closeness and whatnot. Currently, I don't know if this makes a difference, but it's just an above-ground pool. There's no deck structure right now, so seemingly the only way to get on top of the garage, and I know kids have a great imagination and they can find ways to do things and MacGyver it all, but the only way would be is if there was a portable structure like a ladder or something that was brought out. You know, one of the main reasons why we got the pool to put in our yard was because of the fact that we want to be directly involved in the monitoring of our children and anybody else who might be back there. That's why we had the privacy fence put in 6 feet tall with a self-latching gate with a padlock on it to boot. So trying to take all safety precautions as much as we can.
Thank you. Any further questions for the applicant from board members? Seeing none, okay. Thank you, sir. If you could have a seat.
Thank you.
Open up the hearing.
Mr. Chair, if I may, before we open that up.
Yes, sir.
I'm quickly trying to review any other areas that could impact this. And it does appear that the garage is a foot too close. If the schematic is measured correctly, there's a 1 foot 10 inches between the pool and the walkway. The walkway measures 3'2" for a total of 5 feet. 6 feet is required from the nearest main building or accessory building or structure. Likewise, technical points, the AC unit, which we have in the past deemed to be an accessory structure, is only 4 feet away from the outer edge of the pool. So there are other items for consideration.
Is it a fair assessment, Mr. Baumgart, to say that additional potential variances may be necessary based on the information we have in front of us today?
We were specific in the requesting variance to say that was requesting a variance to allow the pool remaining within 6 feet of a fence, which is only item A. Item B has now been called into question, so yes.
So there's potentially 2 additional items that need to be vetted in order for this pool to remain, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay. With that being said, I'll open the matter up to public comment. Does anyone in the audience would like to comment on this matter? No? Mr. Baumgart, have we received any written correspondence?
No, sir.
None? Okay. I'll close the public hearing and bring it back before the board.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Smith.
Again, my background in pool installation is limited. My background in electrical is a little bit stronger. Part of the reason, the key reason for the rear yard setback on a pool is safety. You've got a long lawn brush you're using, and you don't wanna put that thing up in the power lines, it could create problems. This particular installation is well clear of the rear yard setback and the power lines that run along the backyards. There is no safety issue along the northern fence line, which is the one that is close to the pool. Thank you, Mr. Baumgartner, for finding that 6-foot rule. I have sometimes horrible problems recalling things that, you know, one community is X feet, another community is X plus. It's for the air conditioning unit. Again, that's just because you've got water, you've got people with wands. Nowadays we ground things, so there's not as much of a safety issue as there was before. As I look at the application, you know, we have history here in the city of trying to work with the residents. Quite often we're faced with something that is, a resident has done something without pulling a permit, and for us to tell them, no, you've got to tear it back out, that hasn't been our practice. Other than the proximity to the garage roof, and as I explained to the applicant this afternoon, when I put in the pool at my house, I got a rider from my insurance company, and I was 8 feet from the garage, but I just wanted to make sure that if anything did happen, I was covered. So if we do approve this variance, it would be, I would recommend a condition that the applicant provide the city some documentation that he's been in contact with his insurance company and find that they're comfortable with the location of the pool. Mainly because if we approve it, we ought to do it with our eyes wide open.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments or discussion? Mr. Allen?
I mean, I feel horrible for Mr. Chapman and his family. I read this, pulled it out of the packet, and my heart sunk right into my stomach, because this is the one thing you don't want to see. And the request itself doesn't bother me. What bothers me is we have professional installers and professional salespeople that went ahead with something. If they're doing business here in Berkeley, they know what the rules are. And if you're a licensed contractor, you know the state law requires you to pull a permit. It's ridiculous. Now it's off my chest. Thank you.
I have equal problems with the fact that both the installer and the pool company did not at least warn them that they would need to pull a permit for a project this big and have it inspected before it was installed. In order to, if we approve this, can we amend this to include the garage, or do we need to?
No, we can't.
We can't,
We're not
okay.
allowed.
So they would still have to come back
Have to
next
be
month?
re-noticed.
Okay, so they would have to come back next week.
Whenever there's time to get the notices out in accordance. So the application would need to be amended, and
Okay.
as long as there's enough time to get everything published and noticed properly. It's possible the next month could fit in, I would think it would.
With that understanding, could we delay this in order to get the proper resolution before us to include that both the issue with the garage and the issue with the distance between the pool and the AC unit?
We could, and I agree with you, that I think that's necessary. I certainly don't want to presume that anyone on this board or any members of the public shouldn't know all the variances needed. So I believe the appropriate way would be to postpone matter on this application, and I would anticipate perhaps receiving an amended application with the additional variance requests.
Okay.
And that's my thought.
if we do that, then everything else would be clean, per se. We would have an amended application. We would, maybe we need to do one more pass over to make sure that all the variances he needs are put forward. I'd rather have you come back the second time and know that we don't look at it real closely one more time and find something else.
Right.
Because then it just prolongs.
Well, I've got members of the public who aren't here thinking, well, this is just one
The two variances, I don't think are
I couldn't
honestly,
predict
I don't
what
think are.
somebody may think, but that's why we have a public hearing for.
I think for transparency's sake, we need to make sure that we add those in since they've been identified. But I don't think anyone would say, we're trying to slide something in if we didn't do it. But I think, and I don't know if you want to make a comment, but I'd make a motion.
Would it be best as a matter of procedure for the applicant to withdraw so he could change his request? As opposed to us table this request?
Well, what we could do is if we tabled it, then he would, the only reason it's before us is he applied. So if we postponed it and he wanted to withdraw it,
It would be this
there's really
request
not a
or
lot we.
postponing.
What's that? Well, we can postpone this request, but if he withdraws it and replaces it with another request, because he could come in tonight without anything, just say, or any applicant could come in, or a day before the meeting and say, I want to withdraw my request. So if we voted to postpone and he decided he wanted to withdraw it, amend the application. Mr. Allen?
If he withdraws and resubmits his application with these additional things on here, is there a financial penalty, for doing that?
If you were to postpone the application, or if you were to withdraw the application and a new application would be considered brand new, and there'd be a second application fee would be assessed.
Okay, so maybe most expedient for him would be us postponing.
Okay. With that,
No, it doesn't have to be.
well, can I ask staff a question?
Yeah.
Would that work, given Mr. Allen's comment and concern about potential
If
cost?
the board sees fit to postpone this, pending a publication, yes, that would work.
Publication and notices?
Publication for 138-59B in addition to A, yes, that would work.
Look, I've done that where, the jurisdictions that I work for, we essentially send out, say it's the same application revised. So people know they're not confused. I say, well, I just saw this and I thought they had a meeting on it, and now what's going on?
I think Mr. Chapman has a question, I don't know
Yeah,
if it's.
can I approach? Mr.
Sure,
Chair? Okay.
sure.
Just to, I guess I was a little bit misled by what was on the variance. I tried to, when Cecil came out and explained what was too close, it was the fence, the AC, and it was the garage. So I was under the assumption that all three were in the variance application. So I was aware that those were the things in question, and I don't know if that has any bearing on what the decision might be, but I was under the impression that those were also part of the too close. So I just wanted to state that.
So you're, okay? Well,
Yes.
thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Sure.
All right, so given that, I think we're still fine to postpone, send out amended notices citing we need to address an additional B and C, no financial implications. It gives the residents in the area an opportunity to come back should they do so. And then we can fully address all three and either approve or deny this with everything that we need to take into consideration.
I would support a motion that would postpone this matter, and I think staff has heard the board thoughts on the reasons potentially for that. So we can make this as, I would say, painless as possible for everyone involved. There's going to be a delay. We're not anticipating we're going to see this again. So that's my,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Smith.
question for the applicant. Do you have water in the pool now?
There is water down, I think there's only about 2 feet of water in
But
there.
you have the weight you need to keep things from shifting?
Yes, oh yes, sir.
All of this,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Allen.
I'd like to make a motion to postpone and revise the request until our next meeting, which would be hopefully next month, and we can take the rest of that up at that time.
The motion is second? Second. Mr. Jason, any discussion on the motion? Mr. Baumgart?
Mr. Hassan?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Ms. McAlpine?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
And Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Okay, motion postponed passes.
Sir, presumably we'll see you here at next month's meeting.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for
Thank you.
attending. Move on to our next item, which is application for John D. Van Bergen at 3142 Gardner. Mr. Baumgart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let's see, applicants, John and Rita Brandigan?
Van Brandigan.
Van Brandigan, thank you. As a Baumgarten, I like to get people's names right. I miss it quite a bit, so. 3142 Gardner, lots and parcel number noted. On the east side of Gardner, between Beverly and Wiltshire, are seeking an appeal of the zoning officer classifying a generator as an accessory structure. If that appeal is denied, the applicant will be seeking a variance to Berkeley City Code, Chapter 138, Article 3, Division 1, Section 138-53. This is a single-family residence who they're seeking a generator. This board, when looking at these items in the previous time, did say they feel though this is best handled as an accessory structure. Therefore, Planning Commission set about codifying that by ordinance. That process is ongoing, so it would be appropriate to consider this in the same way that we've considered previous ones as an accessory structure. So the ordinance restrictions are noted in your packet, as well as the information provided by the applicant.
Thank you. Do any members of the board have any questions for Mr. Baumgart? Sir?
When was it that that the ZBA looked at that, and their last ruling on the accessory structure?
It was back in June.
I was gonna say, that last meeting, I thought it was.
June.
You read the notes, you read the decision.
It was,
Yeah.
Okay, any additional questions for staff?
you did do it.
Okay. All righty. Well, at this point, I'll ask the applicants to approach the podium and tell us why you need a variance.
Good evening, I'm John Van Brandigan. This is my wife Rita. And we want to apply for a variance to put a generator at the side of the house, approximately adjacent to the fireplace. Our house at 3142 Gardner was originally the parsonage for the Berkeley Radio Missionary Temple. The Reverend Weinzierl, who was the pastor there, had 9 children. We bought the house from his son, who had 6 children. We're down to only 3, and they've flown the nest. The challenge in placing things is that the back of the house is paved, and at the sides it's difficult because the house has 52 windows. And there's, yes. So the installer identified the area adjacent to the fireplace as one of the very few areas that would be acceptable by state law and having sufficient clearance. And also, if we have shrubbery and so forth, I think it would be largely concealed from the street there. So.
Okay. All righty.
And the reason I need it is I have chronic lymphocytic leukemia, and I've gone through quite a series of chemos, which have left me with some respiratory problems. And I need to have access to electricity for a nebulizer, and we need to be able to keep the temperature up. A cold house would not be good.
Okay. Anything else?
The side of the house where we wish to put the generator is next to the empty lot, which is our yard, and we're a whole lot from our nearest neighbor, which is, he's Mr. Luxer. He sent a note to that he was in agreement with it. So it's pretty much concealed and away from all sorts of things.
It's about 60 feet from where the generator would be to his house, so.
Okay.
67 feet.
And the two-car garage in the back, cement area by the time you're putting cars in and out, and you saw that when you came yesterday.
Right.
Maneuvering cars back there, it stands a much better chance of being hit.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I should have asked any members of the board any questions for the applicants. I didn't ask. Seeing none, okay. This point, we'll open the public comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak? Sir, please step up.
Yes, my name is Bill Moyer. I live 2 houses north of the Van Brannikins, and I've lived there 45 years. And I know from Gen X they're very quiet, as opposed to everybody that has generators, and I'm included. When the power goes out, they all go on, and we all hear them for all night and all day. Well, the Gen X are very quiet, and I hope this board does approve their variance in that, because without it, John has a hard time for breathing when the power does go out, because we're so close. Hardin neighborhood is a very close-knit neighborhood, and everybody watches out over everybody else. So that's all I have to say is, like I said, I'm 2 houses north of the Van Brannikins, and I have no issue at all for it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Any other members of the public would like to speak about this matter? Seeing none, Mr. Baumgarten, I know we received at least one written comment, and that was from the,
And
yeah.
there's one from the exposition as well in there.
Yeah, so we did receive a comment, Larry Luxa at 3114 Gardner, which appears to be south and adjacent to the parcel, indicates he has no issue. And then we also have a correspondence from a medical professional indicating, just confirming the physical need to have this electric appliance. Otherwise, there could be an emergency room visit or hospitalization if the power did go out. Any other?
There were no other
Okay.
correspondence outside of what's approved with that.
Thank you. At this point, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Smith.
looking at this application, this is, for one, I want to compliment the applicant on the pictures. They are actually better than real life in terms of describing what you got here.
Thank you.
I try to look at things in a lot of different combinations, and one of the things I see every time I see a wide lot is a potential lot split. And even if there is a 40-foot lot split off the side, you've still got 15 feet from the property line. So I can't find a reason to not permit placement of a generator along the side of the house. And the windows are an issue. You want to be, I believe it's 6 feet from an operable window. we've done things as tight as 3 feet, but you want a distance. The Generac units, especially this, it's a 10 kilowatt unit, 20 kilowatt. That's a big residential generator, so it's even quieter than the small units. I can't find a reason to not support the application.
Any other board members with comments?
No, I disagree with Mr. Smith's comments.
Mr. Cole?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that too. I can't find a place in this whole house to put a 6-foot front window.
No.
Right there.
Yeah.
Literally. It looks like his air conditioning's right there already, which again is an accessory structure.
And you've got
Like
a steel fence, a wrought iron fence, which provides nice screening.
Yeah, I think in this instance, we're gonna be grouping the accessory structures. We do have a parcel that at this point is wider than many. If there were potentially the lot split, the new person moving in would at least know, hey, that's there. I think it's very minimal, and I can tell you from the work I do that manufacturers of these small appliances, such as air conditioners and generators, have actually responded to noise complaints because it has affected their ability to put them where they need to be, and municipalities all over the country are saying things like location, decibels, screening, etc. So the market as a whole, the manufacturers as a whole, have really done an impressive job in the last decade or two to get these units compatible. And even with the regular testing on these units, you get more noise when somebody mows their lawn on a weekly basis than you do for the 5 or 12 minutes per every other week or whatever I saw in the literature that said, hey, they have to be run to be regularly tested. And so I agree with everything that's been said here, and I would have no issue supporting the request. Mr. Allen.
I was just gonna remark that, from our June meeting, the distance from one house to the next was much less than we're dealing with here, even if you split off a 40-foot lot. We didn't have 15 feet to work with last June.
Let's put it in perspective. Mr. Kirby.
You know, we have the AC unit right there. I doubt there's a variance on here for that AC unit to sit over there. We don't, in general, get the variances for those AC units. I know as a builder, when I'm doing work, be it in Berkeley, Troy, Royal Oak, you simply get a letter written from the neighbor that you can put the unit on the side, and that generally takes care of you as far as permitting in the city goes. In fact, in every circumstance, in every city that I've worked in so far. That seems to be the general consensus on that particular item. So this doesn't seem too far off of it.
And I think there's plenty of room, as was mentioned by Mr. Allen. We've got a significant distance. I can envision between my house and another house. That may be a different set of circumstances, but here we've got a lot of room to work with, and there's also kind of a precedent in that area. Well, have you seen any complaints about the air conditioner by chance that you're aware of?
Specific to this one?
Yeah. Okay. No. I'm not surprised. Okay. Okay. There's no additional discussion. Would someone like to make a motion? Mr. Allen.
I'd like to make a motion to approve application number PBA 1017 to permit the installation of a 20 kilowatt generator in the location on the sketch provided with the application.
Support.
We have a motion and support. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Smith.
Just as a point of order, the findings would be consistent with what staff has determined. So we've got the generator is appropriately classified as an accessory structure. Applicant did not create his own problem, and location is minimal impact.
Yes.
Yep, that's great.
Mr. Allen saying yes, and Mr.
Support
Stewart
the changes.
Okay, all right. Any further discussion? Mr. Bunker.
Okay. All right, so Mr. Kirby,
Yes.
Mr. Calpine,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Casson,
Yes.
and Mr. Ellis.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
So you have your variance? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item of business is board discussion, our annual discussion regarding our rules of procedure. And our rules of procedure do say that we are to provide an annual review. Let's say we're supposed to do it in July. If no July meeting, no later than September. But we didn't have a meeting in either. So I just wanted to bring that up, because we are here today. So I guess, Mr. Baumgart, I'll ask you first. Are there any sections of the rules that perhaps staff may recommend or suggest that we look at for modification?
Staff has no such recommendations at this time.
Okay, all right. Board members, any thoughts on the rules as they are?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Smith?
Just to clarify, every time we look at these, we talk about training. And training is important. It's good to stay current. Sometimes just being in the role gives you updates on what's happening in the world of zoning board of appeals matters. But even the training that the city put on earlier, late last year, was it? With, it was over at OCC?
Yeah.
To me, that qualifies as training. We're learning to work a process, learning to communicate, and that's as important as a technical skill. So when we hear about training, it's nice that it's broad here and not specific to,
You have to take a class from.
yes.
Yes.
Right.
And also, Mr. Gusson and I attended a training session.
Right.
With the city of Huntington
Yes.
Woods. That was a very good session.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair, I'll note that, at least in last year's budget, and it's a trend that we intend to continue moving forward, is to provide a dedicated budget for more training opportunities like the ones we had with Huntington Woods, and also like the one we had with the offsite. The one offsite in particular was sort of cross-jurisdictional as far as what planning commission and city council and zoning board does. So it was just a general conduct and sort of utilizing opportunities to cross-train. I think it's certainly a goal of goal of administration through council. So I hope that continues.
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
I think the one thing that we really haven't done is stand on that hard enough. I know that there are people who haven't gone to training in years, and they really, if nothing else, just a little refresher course or catch up on the new stuff. I think it should be mandatory. I realize everyone's a volunteer, everyone's time is valuable, but 4 hours every few years is not a lot to ask.
I agree. I think when you do sign up for any board, training's important. There can be court decisions. I know in my career I've gone to the same training, say 3 years later or 6 years later, and come out with something different, simply because of my experiences or what I've seen on zoning boards. Say, oh, I can relate to that. We had a case like that, or whatever it may be. And as we know, in the last few years, there have been and potentially still could be, if there's ever changes to state laws. Why is that change there? What it was intended to do? When did it happen? How does it affect the board? Or in reference to Mr. Baumgart's comment, the cross-training. I think it's very important for this board to know, how does council fit into this? How does the planning commission fit into this? And as each year goes by, Mr. Smith, you've been on the planning commission for a long time. Some of us have never been, so we all can look at the same moon in the sky, but sometimes from different parts of the world. I think training is important, and I hope we have some training soon.
And it's not just the laws that we have to be trained on, but the judicial precedents that are set. For instance, we got something in our packet, might have even been as long as a year ago, regarding, regarding billboards. That was, I don't think we have any billboards in Berkeley, but it's good to know that in case that issue does come up.
Yeah, we don't deal with signs a lot, but when we do,
Right.
we be current on that.
I just have one question. Is there a need on page 5 where it does talk about the annual review that we maybe need to add something in addition, given that we didn't have a July, an August, September, or an October meeting? And maybe it's just this particular year, but it does say no later than September, but we don't hold a meeting for the purpose of holding that meeting, or if we should have, we didn't. So, I don't know if it should say, or if there's no July, or if there's no July meeting at the next scheduled meeting.
At the next scheduled meeting, yeah. I'd be okay
We've
with
had
that.
that discussion
And I don't
in
get-
prior years, and it's kind of one of those things, there's some reason that the September meeting is in there, but yet our practice has been, if there isn't a meeting, we just carry it forward.
Right, but if we had, so then should we have called a meeting in September to specifically review those, and I don't know.
Yeah, I can't recall the specific discussion, but we've had the same discussion before, and it came back to this wording, and
Yeah.
Does it have something to do with the fiscal year, maybe, that we have to?
I would only be guessing.
Really, the not scheduling it was an outcropping and not having a dedicated staff.
Well, you know what, if we look at the officers as well, it says they should be, there, if there's no July meeting, that should be done in September, so I think those two go somewhat hand in hand.
The municipal attorney in Oxford, when I was there, we went through a similar kind of thing where we just didn't have, the town size of Oxford, you don't have a meeting every month. And I asked him as chairperson, says we need to elect officers and we need to do it at the July meeting, but there isn't any business to tend to. And he goes, then I guess you better call a special meeting.
Because actually, when I thought about it, I thought, oh, I wonder if it has something to do with, this would be the first meeting after the election, is why we were doing officers. Was what originally came to mind, not looking at this to know that it was really September, so.
I think I agree with Mr. Smith, and we all can see what it says. I think we all know what it means on its face, but even though I wasn't here in the discussions, I have to fathom it's in there for a good reason, and while I haven't been able to envision a scenario that might be detrimental if we didn't have a meeting in September, I have to just say it's probably maybe because it's never happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying,
But do we want to be in a position where it does happen to say, what were we thinking?
we could have this for, 10 years from now and it never happened again, but,
No, it's happened quite a few times in the last 10 years.
yeah.
What's that?
I've been on the board since '06, and we've had, some years we've had only 3 meetings.
Oh, I'm referring to
Oh.
whatever may have caused all previous boards to specifically include, like, it has been mentioned here, there's relative related language at the other part of election, it both says September.
Yeah, that's what I'm just,
Yeah, so I would think there has to be a reason, perhaps,
We can get a clarification of that.
Or even just put in our hats for next year. If we don't have a July meeting, let's
Let's have
make
September
sure we have a
meeting.
meeting in August or September.
I'm comfortable with that.
And then we don't have to continually edit.
Sure.
Just make sure.
yeah, no, either we need to follow it next year, or we need to change it.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with either one, I just think we need to figure out what is the most appropriate course of action.
I think it's good that we're having this discussion, get out there.
This issue is not so big as I would want to change our leadership, but that comes later, so.
Yeah, I'll wait for it to Okay. Well,
So
then,
if annual review does not happen, 30 lashings for the manager, is that,
Oh,
is that to be added?
In public.
keep in mind that amendments have to be, under the current rules, we have to be 3 days, so we have a, if we consider that today, we have a month to think about it.
Yeah.
Vet it publicly.
Yeah. Public zoning, we can immediately.
I do apologize to the board that you did not meet in July, August, or September to address these items.
I don't think if we would have never read this, we would have never thought we missed anything.
No, it was properly noted. We had past members of the board that reached out to me and correctly noted it. September ended up where our efforts were elsewhere. Again, we never dedicated a staff person. I hate excuses, but that's exactly what those are, so I do apologize.
Right, I was privy to one email chain. I was copied on about the former member just bringing this to our attention. And, you know, I kept that in mind when I introduced this part here. Well, I guess we can choose to
Close the discussion?
close the discussion. Yeah.
Do we have to have public discussion on that, or are we good?
We don't, but I'd be happy to welcome in case maybe someone is aware, for example, of the scenario that could come up, because I'm really happy. So with that being said, if the board's all set discussing, please let me know if you're not. I'll just ask if any of the members of the public would like to comment on this. Good, okay. Would any members of the public like to comment on this matter? Okay. I see no one nodding, no one approaching, so we'll bring it back to the board, and I think the proper procedure would be to do a motion to acknowledge that we reviewed this and, for example, no changes.
I will make a motion that, I guess we receive and file our rules and procedures for 2017, and given there are no changes or recommended additions, that we approve them as we have them today.
Is there a second?
Support.
I've got 4 people supported. Okay, Ryan was first. Okay. So we have a motion and support. Is there any discussion? No further discussion. Mr. Baumgart.
All right, Ms. McAlpine?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Casson?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Motion received and filed is approved.
Our next item of business is elections, matter of electing a chair and vice chair to the zoning board of appeals.
You want me to do any introduction on this or not? It's
Uh,
what it is.
It is what it is, right. Okay, very good. I appreciated the time I served as chair. At the end of the day, I also feel that if chair is a learning experience and others would like to suggest that they may want to do this, I would not be offended, that's all I'm saying.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Smith.
Your position here as chair, given your professional background, I think it's a good fit. I've been just very pleased with how things flow with you and the vice chair, and if you're both willing to continue, I would, absent somebody else jumping up and down, if they want to jump in, I like no change.
Mr. Kirby.
I would nominate Sue as the vice chair and yourself as the chair for the next coming year.
I would accept that.
I will as well.
Support. Or second, however you want to say it.
Okay. And. Okay. I'm just thinking about, we did say for a year, how does that, thank you for.
Tenure would run to next July or
Okay.
subsequent meeting not to exceed September.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure everybody here was clear, the year means till next July, or next September, okay? Any further discussion on the motion? Mr. Baumgart.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Casson?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Ms. McAlpine?
Yes.
And Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Okay. Congratulations to the newly elected chair and vice chair.
Moving out other business, members of the board or staff have any other business? Mr. Allen?
Just wanted to make a quick comment. The parcel, the two Allen parcels on Franklin Street that came before us, that we tussled and fought back and forth about, they got a really a great ending for that thing over there. They took everything and shoved it to the east, and they took approximately 3 inches off of each house and still have enough room to line everything up there. So it was a very creative way of doing it that was a minimal impact to the size of the house.
The size of a stud.
Yeah.
That's it. That's good news. I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think he came before us a couple times on that one, didn't he?
He did,
Mike?
twice.
A couple different versions.
But fought that lot.
Good.
Great. I was curious to see how that smaller house, if you will, was going to fit in there. I didn't see it was that minimal.
Anything else from any of the board members?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Smith?
I'm sorry, I shouldn't be talking so much. The format for the reports that Matt is putting out, these are wonderful.
Nice, like them.
Yeah, like them all.
It's easy to follow. This is nice work. Thank you.
Thank you.
You make our job easier.
Okay. There's one positive comment tonight.
Well, here comes another potentially positive. For the last couple of years, staff has been including history of building permits and whatnot that goes with the applications. I find that to be fascinating reading, mainly because I look at who was the contractor to do something, but also unnecessary. And I think of the extra probably 50 sheets of paper that we wind up getting. As just a discussion amongst us, is that something that we need? Is it worth the extra cost? My thought would be that every now and then, variance history or building application history is relevant, but other than that, it's interesting. So if anybody else doesn't need them, we could ask to stop that and maybe save a few trees in the process.
I think the only thing that's relevant really is perhaps a history of requests and either grants or fails. You know, I don't care when they got a new roof, although you're right. It's interesting, especially the pricing.
Yes,
Yeah.
$8,000 for a
I think
$250,000 house today.
if the past permit was pertinent to what we're reviewing, yes. But
Yes,
the roof-
exactly.
The
Yes.
roof has nothing to do with what we're looking at, so why make extra sheets of paper?
Yeah. Save some trees.
Yeah, we started
And more-
doing that.
It's more work that the staff and the folks do not need to do first.
Yeah, we started doing that a few years ago, just to get some more background information. I definitely agree with Steve. If we were to just have a list of any past variances applied for, denied or.
And maybe you can add it into this.
I've included minutes sometimes, so we know the particulars.
I think
Why
that
the
would
board
be
decided to do this.
pretty beneficial to us as opposed to, yeah, these are, it's quite a bit of stuff.
But it's good reading.
It is, I read through all those.
Unless it's germane to the current application.
That's what exactly, unless it's pertinent, I don't think it's
And
necessary.
as board members, we can always call before the meeting and say, I've got a question about A, B, and C.
It's
And
hard.
I'm gonna ask that at the meeting, that way staff is prepared.
It's a little hard to do that though, just getting the packet there on the Friday, coming into Monday. If there's 3 items on there, you would have to get out there, check it all out. Be able to figure out what it is you needed, be able to correspond that and get that to you. That would be tough.
If you're out of town, it's tougher.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I do agree that this is a lot of stuff in there. It's pretty cool reading, especially the names and
Yeah.
inspecting and.
I found I might pull a tidbit out here and there, but relative to the amount of paper that I don't use and don't find as pertinent, I would have no issue with that. If I recall correctly, the board, that wasn't a board motion, that was just something staff started doing for
I
us.
think we asked.
We did.
As a board,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
I think past board members had asked specifically.
Past board members,
Yeah.
I guess procedurally, Is that something as a board we have to unask, or did it not get to that?
We didn't put it in our rule, in our rules,
No
we
motion.
just asked.
Yeah.
A couple of times in a row it came up where that would have been very helpful, so I think that's what started it, and then we kind of just haven't needed it since.
Okay, and my question is just for procedure, if formally the board asked at one time, would it be the right way to close it up by having the board ask, request a change? But it sounds like,
We could just request to only include the
Fine.
variance.
Only pertinent
Staff-
information
yeah,
related
yeah.
to variance.
Staff acknowledges the request
staff acknowledges, okay.
and looks forward to fulfilling.
Is the board satisfied? Yeah. Good. Good, all right. Any other business? Okay. Our next item is liaison report, and our liaison, Councilmember Knapple is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's funny that Mr. Gazan brought up about all billboards ever come our way. I think it was back in 2003, there was a big push to have billboards. We had a big meeting at the community center, and I always say the best defense is a good offense, and unbeknownst to me, there was someone in the audience there from the company that was gonna start putting up the billboards, and they withdrew their ideas. So it could happen again, you're right. Training, I was there also in Huntington Woods. I agree, I think it's important. Even as a liaison, I learned a lot while sitting there on that Saturday morning. It was well worth it. Since 2011, I've been your liaison. And we now have a new administration, and it looks like I'm not going to be your liaison any longer. Nothing is definite, but I'm probably going to be moving back over to Parks and Recreation, where I was chair there for 5.5 years of the 6 years I was on the board. I can't thank you guys enough for the work that you do. Each and every one of you, as you said earlier, are volunteers, and you put in your time. And yeah, I know what it's like to get a packet on a Friday and try to get the information by Monday. Okay, we go through that. And I just want to thank you guys for everything. Mr. Chairman, these last few years with you have been excellent, and I thank you for stepping in and doing the great work that you do. And Ms. Vice Chairperson. I want to thank administration for the work they're doing. This poor man has 2 little kids at home. I don't know if this is a good escape for you or what, but no, Matt, you've done great. But not only Matt, Dana and Kim have really stepped up to the plate. And they were in a learning process too. And as I explained to them about the deadline on, you guys have a deadline, so that way you guys can plan your schedules accordingly, whether there's going to be a meeting. And as you can see, that's what they're doing. They have done a great job. And I can't thank them enough either. Doesn't mean I won't pop in from time to time. Hopefully I'll see you guys all around. But again, thank you everybody for the work that you've done and will continue to do. This city is very fortunate to have people like you volunteering and being here and making the tough decisions that you do. And it's not always easy saying no to someone, but sometimes you have to. And it's been great. And I'm glad you made it back safely from China.
Me too.
Thank you for everything, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Just in response, I have a comment. Not in every community does the liaison from the city council or the board attend every meeting. I can say in my experience here, Mr. Kadeko has been to as many meetings as he possibly can, and only under extenuating circumstances is he not. And I want to thank you for that too, your attention to the board. It's good to have a voice on council here.
Thank you.
Okay. We are now on to public comments. Do any members of the public have any comments they'd like to bring to the board? Seeing none, it's 9:05 and I'll adjourn the meeting.